We ready? Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order our regular city council meeting for Tuesday, May 1st, 2012. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And welcome, everyone. Roll call.
Mayor Mays?
Here.
Council President Grant?
Here.
Councilor Henderson?
Here.
Councilor Folsom?
Here.
Councilor Butterfield?
Here.
Councilor Langer? Here. Councilor Clark?
Here.
Thank you. We have 6 items on our consent agenda.
I'll move consent.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Our Eagle Scout did not RSVP and was not able to be here today. We'll move on to citizen comment. Time to address any item not on our agenda to the City Council. Mara Broadhurst, welcome.
My name is Mara Broadhurst. I live at 28440 Southwest Landhill Road in Sherwood.
Great. You can sit if you'd like, or you can stand.
I'm just going to read this because I'm not a very good public speaker.
That's just fine.
To the Sherwood City Council. We own property on the corner of Highway 99W and Meineke Parkway, and also next to the Elks on Highway 99. We've put a great deal of our time, life, and money in the development of these properties and have been held to strict city standards and processes. For the last 3 months, we've been trying to find out why Mr. Doyle, the dentist and land developer, was allowed to purchase property and do improvements without a permit or site plan. We asked the city when Mr. Doyle first purchased the property adjoining his dental office if he would need a site plan to develop a parking lot and that the issues of highway improvements and Cedar Brook Way would be addressed. It seemed his businesses far exceeded the parking capabilities on site, and it was clear one thing was leading to another. Soon after purchase, machines were on site with no permits, site plan, erosion control. We again informed the city and code enforcement, but still no stop work order was issued. We called ODOT and were told both accesses had been sold and that any change from the residential use would warrant the property accessing off the new Cedar Brook Way extension and not off Highway 99W. During business hours, numerous cars are now parking there, and in flagrant disregard to public safety, commercial activity is illegally accessing a public highway. Our concerns are that if Mr. Doyle is allowed to use this access as if it were for a residence and not improve his section of Cedar Brook Way or Highway 99W, he can stifle nearby development. When we did our site plan across the street, we had to bond for the future highway improvements. If Mr. Doyle were to do the required site plan process, dedicate road rights-of-way, and bond for the improvements known to go with that land, the neighbors would be assured that development could proceed in an orderly and legal fashion. Sincerely, Mara Broadhurst.
Thank you, Mara, very much. I know.
Do you want the?
You can give it to the recorder. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mara's husband, Joe, contacted me last week or the week before and informed me of the complaint, and I said we certainly address all complaints seriously, and I know staff is looking into it to address them accordingly, just like other complaints that we've had. So thank you very much for coming today. R.J. Claus?
Robert James Claus, 22211 Southwest Pacific Highway. I'm going to place some things in your file that I think each and every one of you better take time to look at them. You people just won't quit. You're absolutely the most amazing group I've ever seen. Got a call from a guy who wanted to buy the lots on McFall, and he said there's no use trying to buy them because the city of Sherwood's been trying to take those from you. I said, no, they're fooling around with the trail. He said, no, that's not true, Jim. They know they should have paid for those. But I don't want to get involved because Mr. Galati proved his bad will in the terms he put on you to build those lots. Clean Water Services told me the conditions he required are anti-environmental and they were simply to add costs so you couldn't develop the lots. I said, wait a minute, now wait a minute. He said, go down to the open path at Metro and you will see on your property a path through your lots.
Thanks.
So I went down there and Jane Hart got quite an argument with me. Then fortunately, Governor Roberts showed up at the Metro meeting and asked for it to be investigated. Now Dan Cooper told me, wait a minute, it's just a squiggle with a magic marker, we can move them. I'm gonna put these documents, you won't move these. And I advise each and every one to look what your staff's done. Now, we've rescheduled my wife's surgery because this was another attempt, in my opinion, to kill her. I don't think people are gonna stop until you do. You knew full good and well where you were gonna put that road. You had meetings that Michelle Miller hosted and deliberately did not notify us, and OTAC confirmed that today, so that that would go in the Metro's map. Look at the little lines you've got there. They aren't squiggles with a magic marker, kiddos. They're paths you put on there with engineers. Now, my favorite theme is that you're doing this to restrain trade. But I'm not sure that's true anymore. I think the staff has taken such an incredible dislike to my attitude towards your urban renewal, which I think stinks and always will. I don't like anybody steals from school children. What you've done with the refuge and other things has made it so you've got to teach us a lesson. But this is going too far. Even Cooper won't believe it. Here you are, putting something so we can't sell our property. And what was it you told someone? We had to be careful what we did with Nathan Doyle because of Dolan v. Tigard? What do you think you're trying to do besides steal 9 acres from us? Now, don't try to tell me you didn't know what you're doing. It's right there, and it's in writing you needed to pay. Don't tell me you didn't know that when we put in for the subdivision. You're a damn bunch of liars if you do. It's in writing again. And don't tell me that Michelle Miller did not sit there with Jane Hart and have her go after me viciously when they both were in those meetings. Even Dan Cooper is not quite as sanctimonious as Dan tends to be. God forgive me, Dan, but you're like most lawyers. What's the matter with you people? We've done more gifting in this town than any other family. I've had disagreements with you, but this, you exclude us from meetings, you allow trespassing by OTAC. Oh yeah, the city said we could trespass. How could you trespass? Because the city told you it was all right. Was it all right for Michelle Miller to meet with OTAC, and then Metro?
Your time's
and
running
tell her
out,
to put
please.
that there? I've not been able to sell that property now for 3 years. And the reason is this city council. Take some time and clean your act up. Don't just do good things, Keith, for the Langers. I'm getting really tired of this. This thing is nothing but a pure, it's 18 seconds up there. Or did you forget to punch the clock?
No, I
What?
tracked it back here. You're now at almost 5 minutes. So thanks for your testimony today.
Next time, Keith, don't interrupt me because it's a political speech and that's exactly what you're doing.
As the presiding officer, I can interrupt you at my
I'm sorry,
leisure.
I can't hear you. I've never been able to hear you.
That's why. Any other citizen like to make citizen comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. One item under new business today, Resolution 2012-022, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, with ODOT to receive Transportation Growth Management, TGM, funds to develop a plan for the Sherwood Town Center. Julia.
Thank you, Mayor Mays and Council. I really don't have much to say other than what's already in your packet. This is, as you know, we received the Transportation Growth Management grant funds to do our town center plan. And before we can begin that process, we need to have an IGA entered into between the city and ODOT. Attached to the IGA is the scope of work that's been negotiated with the city, ODOT, and the consultants to define who's responsible for what and the general tasks. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Julia. Questions for Julia, Council? I certainly appreciate you, the staff, working to get the grant. It's important work for us to do, and but communities, it's tough for all communities, including Sherwood, to do it on our own. So it's great that those resources are made available so we can undertake this effort. I don't see any questions. Discussion from council on the proposed resolution? Or a motion?
I'll move we adopt Resolution 2012-022.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of approving Resolution 2012-022, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement, IGA, with ODOT to receive Transportation Growth Management, or otherwise TGM, funds to develop a plan for the Sherwood Town Center, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Thank you, Julia. Moving on to public hearings, we have two items under public hearings. First is ordinance 2012-003, amending multiple sections of the zoning and community development code related to trees on private property, including divisions 1, 4, and 8. Before we have the report from Zoe, please come forward. Do we have anything, do we need to read into the record on this one? Statement? Chris? I know we don't for the next one. Just talk loud.
No, you do not.
Great. Welcome, Zoe.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. So as my computer warms up here, this evening we're going to talk about the tree code. This is a portion of the code cleanup project that we've been working on for some time, and this is just a continuation from our discussion on March 20th. Before we get to the revised language and the memo that was in your packet, I wanted to just go through a bit of background for those that may not be familiar with the project. The Planning Commission did a number of work sessions and public outreach between December 2010 and January of 2012. The Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation to the City Council in February of 2012, and as I just mentioned, the City Council had a public hearing in March. We did just have a work session on the proposed changes to reflect the concerns that we heard at the previous council meeting and some additional recommended changes that we'll talk about in just a moment. The purpose of the tree code is, as it has been from the beginning, to establish a fair and flexible code for developers and for the community. That's what we heard at the tree panel, so that's what we've been trying to achieve. And we believe that with the canopy requirement that we're proposing, that we have achieved a fair and flexible, thank you, a fair and flexible code. So this does promote tree preservation, and it makes the trees an asset. As we discussed in the work session, we have recommended that the retained trees count as double for towards the canopy requirement. This does eliminate the mitigation standard. The canopy requirement, as again we discussed briefly, this is a new concept, so it is a little bit different for people to understand because we're used to that mitigation standard. So in order to address that, we have prepared a diagram and a table to be inserted into the code, and it is recommended that it be codified to make it more clear what we're looking for with the tree canopy and how that can be reached. There was interest in understanding why we're actually proposing a tree canopy for the residential developments rather than just having the street tree requirement. There is a current example that's in for review. It's a 26-lot subdivision. Again, we won't have the details because it will come to you to make a decision because it includes a plan amendment. But this development does show that the street trees would only achieve a 30% canopy. They were interested in the tree canopy tree program that we were looking into and tried to achieve their canopy. And with the information that they provided, using trees with a 40-foot and 30-foot spread, they achieved 30% out of the required 40% for residential. This is the table that we're recommending to insert into the code to provide more clarity as to what we're looking to achieve and how people meet the canopy requirements. This shows the requirement for non-residential and residential and what types of trees, so landscape trees or street trees, retained trees, what can be counted to achieve that canopy. We've also broken down the equation to determine how to achieve the canopy when we're looking at it mathematically. We have updated pi, as we'll talk about in just a minute, to ensure that everyone's getting the same results. This is the diagram that we're proposing to insert into the code. This is really to just show what can be used, so you don't just have to have a cluster of 40% if you're residential. These trees can be clumped, they can be retained, they can be planted. So there's a number of ways to achieve this. And as I pointed out, and I'd like to just point out again, the tree canopy is the expected mature canopy, and this doesn't mean that the developer's losing all of this area. You can put a path under trees, you can have parking lots under trees, so it doesn't mean that it will be the scenario with the X in it on the screen. So there was also interest in getting a little bit more information as to how you determine the canopy, and I'd like to reiterate that this applies to type 2 and through 4 projects. So the number of trees that are needed, I'm just going to move to the example because I think it's a little bit more clear. So if you had a 1-acre site and you're a residential site, you know that you need a 40% canopy when you either look at the code language or you look at the table. And then from there, you could select the trees that you're going to retain on site and select your street trees and any additional trees that you want to place on site to achieve your canopy. Below, there's a few sample options. There's a number of ways that this could be achieved to provide that flexibility to developers. But as the example shows, you could retain 6 trees. This is using the double counting for retained trees with a 40-foot spread, or by planting 4 trees with a mature canopy with a 30-foot spread. Another option would be for a site that doesn't have any trees. So you could plant 11 trees with a mature spread of 30, or plant 8 other trees that have a 40-foot spread. As I mentioned, in addition to the memo in your packet and the revised code in Exhibit 1A and 1B, we have recommended that a few additional changes be added to clarify the language a little bit further. And in the memo dated May 1st, 2012, with the revised language titled Draft Tree Code Language, May 1st, 2012, we've added a few clarifying pieces. So the first one is clarification to the applicability. So this is referring to the type 2 through 4 projects. We realized as we looked at that example I mentioned a minute ago that since we look at the highest level of review when we determine the process, we wanted to ensure that any project that includes a type 3 through 4 be required to address the tree canopy. So we've added all applications including type 2 through 4 land use review rather than just all type 2 through 4 land use reviews. Additionally, we've updated or recommended that we update the 2 sections D2 and D3 that talk about the required canopy for both residential and non-residential to add that a variety of trees be provided in order to achieve the canopy, to encourage people to not only plant one type of tree on site. As I mentioned, the table has been updated to identify how many decimal places you're supposed to go when using pi. And that's also updated in the diagram to ensure that the numbers are correct. On pages 12, 20, and 22 of your new code language, we discussed the significant tree standards and the necessary buffers between section. And in order to make it clear that they're only required buffers, it's recommended that it read necessary in required buffers. Additionally, for tree protection or tree protection during the development, as we've updated the code, all the qualified professional and arborists have been added to all of the sections. So this is a section where we just had arborists, and we're adding other qualified professionals to be consistent. And finally, the trees on private property not subject to land use review, but non-residential, we've added an exemption to replacement for those sites such as St. Francis that in the future might need to remove trees, and it doesn't make sense to require them to replace trees. So we've proposed an exemption for that and clarified 1/2 in section 16.142.080C2-3, which is also for the non-residential pieces that don't require land use. So I kind of breezed through the new changes. So if you have additional questions there, I'm happy to address those. So your next steps this evening, staff recommends that the City Council adopt the updated version that you have in front of you, dated May 1st, 2012. And in order to do so, we'd recommend that you make a motion to modify Exhibit 1A to reflect the revisions identified in draft tree code language May 1st, 2012, and then a motion to adopt Ordinance 2012-003. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Zoe. Before we do that, we'll let folks from the community address council on the proposed ordinance. So here's an opportunity to address council on the proposed ordinance 2012-003. RJ Claus.
Robert James Claus, 22211 Southwest Pacific Highway. First, your form to sign up for the meeting is a form of prior restraint, and in addition to that, it violates time, place, and manner content restrictions. Secondarily, I'm going to put Zoe Monahan and Julia Hyduck's resume in power, the Orange Compliance Agreement, and the Langer's tax ruling. Now, I have to go fast because I want to appeal this to Luba. One, why is it not retroactive for every place in town? Why is 99W singled out? Two, there are provisions on 99W. Ms. Hyduck knows that she will make an excellent recipient witness where you cannot grow these trees. They come and take them out. In fact, when I told her they were going to take out exactly the trees specified in the Oregon sheet owed up, and I would say politely, PG&E told her to mind her own business. The legal liability for the trees you're suggesting on 99W in that section are beyond belief. You can't even get policies to cover it. Number two, you have native species in here. It is confused, it is mixed up. I have raised hybrid poplars. They are meant for pulp, they are meant for harvesting. They are not defined in here, and you also define native species as non-native species. This needs to be clarified, obviously. The other thing that I can't understand is numerous sections in here continually mix up what you're talking about. Let me make a point to you so you try to understand. Poplar lives 30 to 50 years. It grows very rapidly. It then dies. Some of the trees I planted grow very, very slowly. At 50 years old, they're nothing. Under this ordinance, it would be impossible to replace a poplar when it dies of natural death because it's destined to. You take none of those considerations in. Finally, you're requiring that it would enter a federal government-controlled highway and landscape it. I think you better take a little time reading the compliance agreements before you tell us we can do that. That is simply a condition. Now, the point I'm going to try to make is, a number of years ago, Mayor Gilgun in Woburn, Massachusetts told me there are two reasons you write ordinances like this. One, so you can get voter support by saying, don't pay any attention to them, I won't let them support it. That appears to be the case in this town. He said, that's how I get my campaign money. Guess where our mayor goes. And number two, I'll give you a variance if I'm a Democrat. You can't read this ordinance, make anything out of it. You've got too much vague language in here. Native species, and then you list a bunch that aren't native species. My favorite story about that, Carol Connell said one day she wanted one of the subdivisions planted native species. Bob Salisbury planted them for me. She went over there and said, but none of these are on our tree list. And he said very politely, dear Yo-Yo, no native species are on your tree list. That's what you've done again and again and again. You've met standards we can't meet. We don't know what they mean. But if we can call the mayor, as our good friend the dentist can, we can get exceptions. I don't think a city should be run that way. Well, I'm going to put these in. We'll take our best shot. But I want to keep hammering away one thing. There's a conspiracy in this town to restrain trade and harm 99W. And repeatedly it comes in a myriad of ways. Sign code enforcement, sign code language, trees, so that you can get money out of renewal. And I recommend each and every one of you recuse yourself because we're getting the money to run the cities by stealing from school children.
Anyone else like to give testimony on the proposed ordinance? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Zoe? Questions for Zoe? Councilors? Councilor Butterfield?
Well, I've spent quite a bit of time reviewing this document as well, and I recognize the effort that you put into it. It's a lot cleaner, it's a lot simpler. I frankly like what you've done with it, so congratulations to staff.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Langer?
So look, is that right? Is this one working? So on page 4, got a question for you. Actually, maybe it's not
Councilor
specific.
Langer, which document are you looking at?
Oh, I'm on your
Update?
updated
Okay.
draft language.
Thank
Well,
you.
maybe it's not specifically on that page, but anyway, that's where I've got my notes written. But isn't it correct that as far as the trees that we plant, or well, anybody in the community plants to meet these canopy requirements, only the canopy requirements is what I'm asking about. We're not defining what size caliper tree has to be planted.
No, with the canopy requirement, so trees on private property that are subject to land use review we're looking at the canopy, so we're not looking at how they're measured. When it comes to the diameter breast height, we're just looking at the spread, the expected mature canopy spread.
Right, so
those
if I
trees.
understand you right, say in a residential example, the person could plant a couple street trees, they get credit for that, and they could go in the backyard or anywhere in the yard and plant a seedling. There's no defined caliper for that tree and protect it adequately, and they're meeting the canopy requirement.
Right. I think that we're trying to provide flexibility to the different developers. So I think in their landscape plan, if they were to show that seedling is protected and it's going to grow, then that could count. Yes.
I'm just trying to make sure we all understand. I know one of the first fears that was expressed to us from home builders and some others that they'd have to go plant more of these expensive, say 2-inch plus caliber trees, and there's a lot of investment in that. But that's not necessarily required here. in
Other
the
than
code.
on the street.
Other
Right,
than on the street.
Right, those trees do have to be 2-inch caliper. And I do want to mention, just for those that haven't been following the tree code, that if they were seedlings, we'd want to make sure that they are healthy and that they do grow and they aren't just sitting out there and someone with a lawnmower comes over and
Right.
kills them. So
Yeah, they
we
would need to
would
be-
want them to be replaced if they die.
And protected adequately.
Right.
Okay. All right, I think I've got another one here. So in reading the language regarding retained tree canopies, in the case where an existing tree might exceed the canopy that you would find in literature, so say the literature of a fir tree, the literature says it maxes out at 40 foot, but you've got an actual tree that exceeds that. If the applicant can prove or measure, justify that their tree is larger, they would get actual credit for
Yeah.
that canopy.
Yes, that's reasonable, and we don't identify a specific resource. So if an arborist report said there's an existing tree on site, it has X canopy, that's going to be the same as saying, well, I really only have a small maple that's only 10 years old and the spread isn't all the way at maturity. So in fact, we're actually getting more as a city because that tree has a larger canopy. So yes, that would be acceptable.
Okay, with regard to the retaining existing trees, I'll commend you on the addition of giving 2 times the credit, because those existing trees look great in our community. That might be it.
Great, thank you.
Great, I'll chime in, and
Yep.
if you have more to add, certainly come back to you. So, kudos, we certainly had lots of questions when this was before us at the last time, and really appreciate all the outreach that you did in the community with all the different groups. Takes a little more time, but helps get a better product. As I mentioned in the work session, it's certainly difficult to predict the future with anybody, but there's the potential that someone will come in with a project and they believe that they can't achieve that canopy requirement of whatever kind of project it is. Will there be some sort of process that they can try and show or demonstrate to make an argument for a variance?
Right, so as recommended with the tree code, there's nothing specifically in the tree code, but we do have the variance process, as Julia mentioned in the work session. We
So
do
just
have
like-
the variance and
yes.
adjustment process that we can use, and hopefully and we know now that that's something that the council is.
Well, I mean, I think it's very
Interested
much
in
achievable
applying.
with what you're now proposing, but like I said, I can't predict the future.
Right.
I don't know about anybody else, but on how development might change in one category or another. So just to say that on the record that there is a variance process that people can make an argument for consideration. Appreciate that. Other questions or comments, Counselor?
I just wanted to make point on page 19 of the handout of the updates. The thing that my neighbors have been asking me about is, how does this tree code affect me?
Excellent.
And these are the people who are residents of the city of Sherwood. And so under residential, single-family, and two-family standards, I just wanted to point out, because this is a question that I got a lot when we were talking about the tree standards, that an existing residential property can remove up to 5 trees
That aren't street trees.
that aren't street trees, or up to 10% of the number of trees on the site within a 12-month period. And that notification to the city is a great way to handle your neighbors and everyone else understanding that you are taking this tree out and that you can take up to 5. And then if any questions come to the city, they know, yep, it's okay, that's number 3, and they've notified us, and we're good.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We haven't spent a whole lot of time on the private property not subject to land use. The focus really has been on the subject to land uses. That's the most new. So thank you for bringing that up.
Because if you have to take out take out your street tree, you have to replace your street tree in our code.
Right, and that's a
Different section.
Right.
Yep. But in general, people keep planting trees in their yard, and sometimes they overplant and they want to make changes.
Right.
I certainly know people that plant a tree and then it gets to a certain size and they go, "Oops, that wasn't our expectation," and they want to remove it and plant something else. Excellent. Other questions for Zoe from counselors? Debate from counselors on the proposed ordinance? Hearing none. Well, as a first step, I would like to make a motion to modify Exhibit 1A to reflect the revisions identified in draft tree code language May 1st of 2012 for ordinance 2012-003.
I'll second.
Discussion on the motion to modify Exhibit 1A? All in favor of the motion to modify Exhibit 1A to reflect the revisions identified in the draft tree code language dated May 1st, 2012 for ordinance 2012-003, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The ordinance is amended. We now have an amended ordinance. Debate on the amended ordinance? Or a motion to read, caption, and adopt?
I move we read, caption, and adopt ordinance 2012-003 as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Read the title of the ordinance as amended, and then do a roll call in that order, or the reverse seniority order.
Okay, this is an ordinance amending the multiple sections of the zoning and community development code relating to trees on private property, including divisions 1, 5, and 8.
As amended.
As amended, thank you. Counselor Clark?
Aye.
Counselor Langer?
Aye.
Counselor Butterfield?
Aye.
Counselor Folsom?
Aye.
Counselor Henderson?
Aye.
Counselor Grant?
Aye.
Council President Grant, sorry.
Aye.
Mayor Mays?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, council. Moving on to ordinance, in the packet listed as 2012-004, amending Sherwood Municipal Code, section 15.16.100 regarding system development charge credits. Am I correct that that number is wrong and it needs to say 007?
That's correct.
Okay. Tom.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This ordinance is trying to accomplish two things. First off, in 2007, we revised the system development ordinance that applied to the city of Sherwood, and that included the section involving credits. And a lot of that was trying to clean up a lot of old ordinances and resolutions which amended that ordinance. And one thing that we did in changing that was inadvertently we took out a section of the ordinance that required notification to developers that they had credits available for their property if they built a qualified improvement. And so we ran into a situation where we had a developer that came in for a land use approval, and at that point in time, the road that they had proposed to build was not in our transportation system plan. It wasn't on our capital improvement plan, and it wasn't eligible for system development charge credits because it wasn't on any of the lists and wasn't included in the methodology. Well, this development took a fair amount of time in order to get from one phase to another, And during that process, we modified our transportation system plan, we modified our transportation SDC methodology, we modified our transportation system development ordinance and code, and it was kind of missed on everybody's part that during that process, that road did become a collector and it was creditable. And so the developer really didn't have very good notice. We did notify them at one point in time, but it wasn't clear in their minds what that meant, and we didn't probably do the best job of communicating back and forth. So they ended up in a situation where they ended up building a road that otherwise was SDC creditable, but did not make application within 90 days of finishing their project, and so therefore we couldn't extend them transportation credits. And so that didn't sound right to us, didn't sound fair, and that wasn't the intent of what we intended to do. So this ordinance does two things. First off, it clears up any projects that happened from that time until January of 2012. If they didn't meet the 90-day requirement, then they can come in and ask for system development credits, and as long as they meet the requirements of the ordinance, the outlining system development credits, they would be able to get those for that road improvements. And then the second thing is it amends section 15.16.100 and adds in item H some text. At the time the city accepts the qualified public improvement, the city shall provide written notice to the person making the improvement that the improvements may qualify for credit under this section. This notice shall state that the credit requested must be filed within 90 days of the date of acceptance. So that puts a burden on us to make sure that we notify developers that we believe that their property may be eligible for credits and that they're on notice that they have 90 days to get us the information back. So we're trying to make things better, make sure that there isn't miscommunication in the future, and to treat developers fair in the community.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate staff recognizing the error. This ordinance, while under public hearings are not required, or public testimony is not required, correct? It's up to the discretion of council.
That's correct.
So, council, do we want to, is there a request from council to have citizen comments on the proposed ordinance?
It's housekeeping.
Pretty much it's housekeeping. Discussion from questions of Tom on the proposed ordinance. Counselor?
I just want to make sure that I'm clear on this. What we're doing here is trying to be more customer service oriented and help with the system development charges. And we're not trying to sneak anything by. We're trying to be focused on helping the developer, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't necessarily put requirements on ourselves to do things unless we think it's important to make sure that people are treated the best they possibly can. And if we identify a credit that they may not be aware of, then we want to make sure that they know that, so that if they feel they've made a qualified improvement, that they can have their SDCs reduced through credits. Charges reduced through credits.
As a counselor, I really appreciate this step because it is something that in a large development project could easily be overlooked as things change. And so I appreciate the effort staff has taken on this.
Excellent. Are there any other comments for discussion on the proposed ordinance? Is there a motion to recaption and adopt?
I move we read, caption, and adopt ordinance.
Oops, I apologize. First,
sorry.
we need to,
I need to.
first amend
Yeah.
the title to.
I move that we amend the title of ordinance 2012-004 to ordinance 2012-007.
I'll second that. So again, this is to make sure it's labeled properly. So moved in second, discussion on the motion process. All in favor of the motion, the motion to change the title of this ordinance to ordinance 2012-007 from 2012-004, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we have an ordinance 2012-007. Is there a motion to read, caption, and adopt?
I'll move we read, caption, adopt, and adopt ordinance 2012-007
Second.
as amended.
Great.
Ordinance 2012-007, an ordinance amending Sherwood Municipal Code Sections 15.16.100 regarding system development charge credits as amended. Counselor Clark?
Aye.
Counselor Langer?
Aye.
Counselor Butterfield?
Aye.
Counselor Folsom?
Aye.
Counselor Henderson?
Aye.
Council President Grant?
Aye.
Mayor Mace?
Aye. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, council. Moving on, city manager and department reports.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I wanted to just point out a couple of things here. We have had increasing number of complaints from citizens, from city council, from staff members, and just from the public in general in regards to inappropriate behavior taking place out in the plaza, specifically damaging this new facility that is a very nice public asset. We've seen people out there taking large boulders and just smashing them into the ground, beating up on panel doors, trying to open up cabinets and beating on them, and other activities other than just skateboarding and jumping off of things, jumping down rails, damaging rock and everything else. And so, as you know, we took what we had hoped was kind of a proactive action in order to put together a skateboard ordinance and an ordinance to protect public places. And I just wanted to let you know that we've heard those comments. We're starting to take this more seriously. I've talked with Chief Growth, and we're going to be putting into place a plan to start cracking down on that type of behavior, especially where it's causing damage and where it's just being disruptive. We've also had a lot of negative comments from people in the park who have generally been very rude to a number of different people and just talking back. So, as we said, we were going to take progressive action in regards to what happened out there. And I just wanted to let you know that we're going to be stepping up not only our enforcement, but the way that we deal with those issues, up to and including potentially levying fines against people if necessary, if that's what it takes to correct that behavior. Obviously, that's our last desired option, but if that's what it takes, that's what it takes, as well as looking to get compensated for damage that's done out there. We do have cameras that will be active here very soon, and so we'll be able to watch that area with a much more careful eye. We'll probably be putting some signs up, although we're not required to since it's a public place, to let people know. But we want to let you know that we take that public area, which is a very nice area, very seriously. We want to make sure that it lasts for a very, very long period of time. And some good news on the plaza. June 1st, we have decided on a date for a grand opening celebration that will correspond with a time where we actually can turn the water features on for the summer season. And so Kristen is working on with some of the partners in the community to have a celebratory event at the plaza, and there'll be more information to follow. But I just want to let you know that that's scheduled for June 1st, and we're looking forward to doing that. Second item I have is just really kind of an update. It's just more of a timely thing. I think that council has probably read or heard about a dog bite. Ozzy, as you all know, is our canine in the police department, and as the organizer reported, there have been a couple bites, and the latest was with an officer that was on duty. We take these issues very seriously, and I know Jeff and his staff has really taken a hard look. Jeff suspended the canine program for a period of time while we took a look into that, and Jeff has come to the conclusion that Ozzy is just not going to be the dog for us. And so what that essentially means is Ozzy will be going back. We will get a credit for the costs that we paid to acquire Ozzy. And in the meantime, we'll be kind of putting a pause on the program to make sure that we have the proper policies and procedures and everything in place, so that when we do replace that canine, that program can be successful and move forward. But I want to let you know that I support that program. Jeff has talked to many K-9 units in the state, and I've talked to other city managers who have K-9 units, and it's a great program, and we need to find a way to make it work, but we need to find a way to make it work so that it's effective and that people don't get hurt. People that aren't don't get hurt.
Right. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for both those updates. Certainly, I know folks that have been concerned about the dog and our officers, but also supportive of the program too. And then on the plaza, great for June 1. It's going to be exciting. I know the youth and community that are the majority, that are fantastic kids, are excited to have that open and the water turned on. And hopefully we will continue to correct the behavior of a very, very small minority in our community that are not appreciating that asset and other assets in our community. I've talked to one skateboarder who was fantastic, and I've talked to a few other skateboarders who were less than that. So thank you very much, Chief and Tom, for that. Council announcements. Any announcements from council tonight? Seeing none, we will adjourn the city council meeting. And do we need a break before we go to urban renewal, or are we good to go, council? I think we're good to go. All right. So, brief pause. Are you good? Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order our regular Tuesday Sherwood Urban Renewal Agency Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, May 1st, 2012. Roll call.
Chair Mays?
Here.
You just say Mr. Grant.
Thank you. Mr. Grant?
Here.
Ms. Henderson?
Here.
Ms. Folsom?
Here.
Mr. Butterfield?
Here.
Mr. Langer?
Here.
Ms. Clark?
Here.
Thank you. We have five items under the consent agenda this evening.
I'll move consent.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor of approving consent as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. We have two items under new business today. First is URA Resolution 2012-012, authorizing the Urban Renewal Agency Administrator to award the construction contract to R&H Construction Company for the construction of the parking lots associated with the community center. Tom.
Good. Mayor and Chair and board members, thank you. At the April 3rd meeting, we worked on a resolution to move the community center forward, and at that meeting I mentioned that we would be coming back with a couple of resolutions for your consideration because we needed to break some things out of the project for various reasons. And the first one of those for your consideration tonight is the parking lots associated with the community center. Those parking lots will actually, we expect to receive some compensation in the future from development that happens around those parking lots, and so we want to make sure that we're able to track those costs separately. So what we have before you tonight is a resolution that would allow us to enter into a contract with R&H Construction, who is our CMGC contractor, which we've previously selected for this project, in order to construct the parking lots associated with the community center.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. Questions for Tom on the proposed resolution?
So one of the reasons we're doing this is because this was not budgeted as part of the community center project, and we want to make sure that we don't forget to do it.
The previous resolution you passed did not include the parking lots.
Right.
So yes, we want to make sure that it is included in the overall project, and that we have the authority to enter into a contract to build it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of Tom? Discussion on the proposed resolution? A motion on the proposed resolution?
I move that we pass URA Resolution 2012-012.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of approving URA Resolution 2012-012, authorizing the Urban Renewal Agency Administrator to award the construction contract to R&H Construction Company for the construction of the parking lots associated with the community center, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Thank you, Tom. Next, under new business is URA Resolution 2012-013, authorizing the Urban Renewal Agency Administrator to award the construction contract to R&H Construction Company for the construction of the co-location facility within the community center. Tom?
Well, again, this is something that we mentioned at the previous meeting, and a co-location facility is something that's been talked about in Sherwood for a long time. And essentially what a co-location facility, what we mean by that is essentially a room with racks that allow users to come in and put in computer servers or data storage devices within inside of a facility that has great broadband capability, backup power, and redundant power systems, so that their information can be protected. I mean, as we all know in this world, data is more and more valuable all the time, and rather than just doing a tape backup, people are actually having redundant sites, so if their primary site goes down, they're immediately online. Or in some cases, there are certain facilities that would use that as a primary site and then have a redundant site somewhere else. So there's a large demand for these type of facilities around. The city has talked about it because for a number of reasons. One is the city would like to be able to divide our Sherwood broadband equipment from the city equipment, because right now they're in the same location and it makes sense to have those separated in some sort of fashion. But we really have been kind of prevented from doing it because none of the facilities that we've had or have been retrofitting have had the ability to achieve the kind of cost savings that you would see. This building is being totally redone, so you can redo all the power systems and the rooms and all the data lines and everything that go into the facility. So this is kind of a good opportunity to be able to build this facility within inside of a larger facility that's actually being completely renovated. Obviously, we would only be using a small portion of the facility. We're probably looking at around 12 racks of computer equipment that could be placed in, and a rack would consist of multiple servers or multiple data storage devices in one rack. And typically, we have some advantages in Sherwood that make our business model, we think, will be highly competitive. And first off, we have Sherwood Broadband, which is a very high-speed network. But we also recently have come into agreements to provide redundancy on that system, so a totally separate line that goes a totally separate direction, so that if there's ever a break in the fiber system in one way, there's a redundant system to bring that. And that's very, very appealing to people who want protection. They're looking for a site that with important data there, so that they would do that. The other things that are important with those type of facilities is they have large power demands. They also have require backup generators and battery supplies to take over until the backup generators come into effect, and those could be designed into this facility. Matter of fact, they already are designed into the facility and can be constructed. So kind of the business plan that we've taken a look at, the PITIC charge is about $1,000 per month per rack. And we can accommodate 12 racks in there. Probably a couple of those racks we wouldn't be getting money on because they would be related to the operation of the facility or something else. So just some quick numbers. At $1,000 a month for 10 racks, I guess my math didn't work here now that I look at it real quick. Well, no, it does, because 10 racks per month would be about $120,000 of gross revenue per year. We're looking at our estimates about $72,000 a year to operate it. A lot of that's power. There's very high power requirements for those type of facilities. And so kind of our expected net revenue is $48,000 a year. And those are very rough numbers, obviously. This is based on the best that we could do. We've been talking to people to see how much interest there is. We know that in general there's interest, but how much interest there would be in Sherwood. And just with a few conversations, we know somebody who's looking probably to take 2 racks. We have somebody else who would probably take another rack. And that's without even really spending very much effort in trying to find people for that. So,
And the value to the community for doing this, other than providing an asset for local businesses to use and not have to travel to Hillsborough or Portland, is revenue generated to help sustain the operations of the community center when it's open.
that's correct. And that's what I was just going to say is essentially that would, if those numbers turn out to be true or some proportion of them, we're looking, somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 going in that could support the operations of the community center. So that's why you would do this project is to basically support the operation of the community center, because we know it's going to cost money to turn the lights on and the power on and have people there to do stuff, janitorial services, bathrooms, and everything else. So there are costs associated with that structure, and we would hope that these monies could be used to lower the operating costs of that facility.
Fantastic. Questions for Tom? Counselor?
So the charge to have the rack available, does it kick in even if we don't have a renter for the rack, or if we don't have a business that wants it? It only kicks in when we turn it on.
That's correct, and that's why in my staff report I said it's unlikely that the racks will be filled in the very near term, and probably looking at 75% of the racks filled 3 years after sale. That's being pretty conservative. But yeah, it's going to take time to build it up. So your first few years, you're probably not going to see much operating.
But your
revenue.
expense.
But your expense
She's
won't be
talking about
there
the
either.
expense of having the rack.
Yeah, so
A rack doesn't consume power unless
power,
the rack is being
unless
used.
it's turned on.
I missed your question.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
absolutely correct.
Good. So essentially, we're not incurring expense until we're incurring revenue.
For data or anything.
Yes, your operating costs are very, very small.
Right.
Until you
And so
actually put it
this
online.
wouldn't be a drain or something that was operating in the red or, in any significant amount of tens of thousands of dollars until we built up a clientele. And then we shouldn't be operating the red because we have a good business model that says that we won't.
That's correct.
Okay.
Great question. Other questions for Tom? Counselor? Or, sorry, Ms. Henderson?
Thank you. So is your proposal to add this room to the community center with 10 racks?
It essentially would be a space. We haven't actually specified the equipment. That would probably be something that I'm sure broadband would purchase to actually put the racks in. The racks are not a very high cost item, but we put them in and add them as necessary. And there might be some people who've had some specific requirements. They might
Right.
want earthquake loading racks and some other stuff too. So we'd figure that out as depending on what the needs of people were.
So do we start with a small inventory of racks, and then as customers come, they'd buy more equipment, and that would come out of that 48K a year?
It'd come out of the 72 to operate it per year. So
Oh, you factored that in?
yes.
Okay. And I'm not overly knowledgeable in this. When somebody needs a redundant system like that or a backup system, are they going to sign a lease with us or with Sherwood Broadband?
Yes, we would have a lease agreement
Okay.
for the specific space, and there would be obviously, and there would be a lot of stuff in regards to that, both to protect them and to protect the city.
Right. Okay. And back to Board Member Folsom's comment, that's not going to be a lot of time of staff time. Once they get it set up, it will just run itself.
Essentially, that's the way we proposed it. There are different types of co-location facilities. There are some co-location facilities where you have a network engineer that basically manages databases and the computer system for people. That's not what we proposed here. We see this as more of a facility where other people would have the ability to come into the system and maintain their own equipment, and would appreciate doing that because they're in the metro area. I mean, we know that people that are running systems in Eastern Oregon
Sure.
who live here and would much rather have their facility here than way over there. So
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Right here.
I apologize.
Oh, that's all right. So, did I butt in on you? Okay. So, I think I'm hearing the location here in Sherwood with respect to some customers that we might have that live around here or whatever. That's a feature. If I was looking for a co-location facility and I wanted to have the best reliability, I think I would just put my racks down at the Piddock building. I mean, if it was, that's as direct connected as you can get. And I'm just not clear on what we're offering. I just hate that if you build it, they will come. And I don't think that's what I'm hearing from you, but if there's even a hint of that, I'm just really careful about that as a business plan. What is it? Why would someone pay us $1,000 if they could simply put the thing down at the Piddock building?
Well, Brad is here, and I'm sure Brad can answer that question, but the Piddock has very limited amount of space.
Their website says they have space available. Come one, come all.
Let me have
Okay.
Brad answer.
I don't mean to be arguing.
No, it's a good question. I don't have the answer. So thank you, Brad.
Great question, actually. It's all about location. In the event of an emergency, you may not want to drive downtown Portland. And these facilities are all over the place. So the Piddock is not the only. They're in Hillsborough, they're in Beaverton, they're in not dark alleyways, but they are in
probably in dark alleyways.
They're in business parks, and you would never know them when you drove by them. So I don't know that the Piddock is the best. It's just one that's most well known. And from what I can tell, there's not really much this direction. The state's got a big data center for state agencies down in Salem, and I'm certain there's others down in Salem. But what we've been told is, if we have a major earthquake, you might not be able to get across bridges. Maybe those companies that are on the south side are more apt to pick Sherwood than somewhere else.
Great.
So,
Mr. Langer?
If the primary cost is power, electricity, does this co-location room have its own HVAC system and meter to keep it independent of?
Definitely. And one of the things I'll just mention is that we've talked with the engineers of the building and said, even though we've got this very nice generator that may sit idle most of the time when we don't lose power, and if the data center is not using all the capacity of that generator and we had a power outage, they can flip a switch so it could power the rest of the building as well. So this is not just for the co-location facility. It's going to be designed or proposed as a generator, and that's a big portion of this cost that can be used inside the building. If power on lights, power on HVAC for the building, so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Anywhere where you're using a lot of power, you have a lot of heat. And so one of the things we've also been talking about is maybe come up with multiple units so that we don't have one very large unit while it's growing. You can turn units on over time so that you're not overcooling or undercooling. Definitely. And being inefficient with your cooling system as well. So
good. Any other questions?
Just a couple of clarifications. When we talk about a rack, a rack can be defined in a couple ways. A rack can be simply just a rack, which is shelving that you set the equipment on, or a rack could be actually some network equipment. In this case, we're not buying anything. We're just providing shelving for
a place to screw in your equipment.
Correct.
Yeah.
And my other question is, are we also going to have a UPS backup?
Yes. Open for discussion as to how that'll be configured. I'm kind of leaning towards that would be a tenant-provided piece, which I've seen it done that way before, where you bring your own UPS, and a UPS is just short-term battery backup before the generator to kick on. So I don't know that we want to manage that for tenants. So we would say that that's something that you have to provide yourself.
That would be my recommendation, that we have them provide.
As much as possible, we've proposed this as being low tech as possible. It's really just a room with really good power and really good cooling.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions of Tom or Brad? Discussion on the proposed resolution? A motion on the proposed resolution.
Move we approve URA Resolution 2012-013.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of approving URA Resolution 2012-013, authorizing the Urban Renewal Agency Administrator to award a construction contract to RNH Construction for the construction of the co-location facility within the community center, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Thank you, Tom and Brett.
Thank you, Brett.
I don't know if I'm jumping in, but on probably under staff reports or a little before staff reports, at the last URA board meeting, we approved a paver program. The paver program committee met, and they requested a couple of changes for our consideration. If we agree in concept, staff will bring back an amended resolution at our next meeting. The changes that Tom is suggesting is fairly simple, to allow both uppercase and lowercase text, and then to put allow a solid line to divide the third paver sections. So if you buy a third of a paver, in the half paver as well, or just the third paver?
The half paver actually specifies that there will be a solid
Oh,
line.
I gotcha.
And for some reason
Yep.
on the third paver, we said there would not be solid line. And when you're limiting it to one line of text on a third of a paver, there's plenty of space for a solid line. And we've had some mock-up examples, and it actually looks much better with the line there. So we recommended that. And then on the capitalization, there's a lot of, especially in businesses, prefer to have a capital or non-capital because that's how they do their business, so it makes sense. And we also looked at the proposed fonts and text, and they look really good in both capital and non-capitalized, so we figured that there wasn't any reason to just limit people to capitalized text.
So in general, is there any objection to those?
None.
I think
Seems
they're pretty
reasonable.
So, Tom, if you'd bring back a new resolution or amended at the next meeting, that would be fantastic.
We'll be happy to do so.
Other staff reports?
No, that covered it. Thank you.
I got an email because I knew we would be doing it, but I was glad to see that staff is meeting with the Old Town property owners and businesses this week or next week as we're getting into the design of Washington and Railroad reconstruction. So to be sure and get their input and direction, and as well as scheduling and all that, get their input. That's fantastic. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've said it privately to pretty much everybody I can. I'll say it publicly here. It is very important that we talk to them. We have talked to them in the past, but we want to make sure as we start the design effort that we're taking into the needs of the businesses in Old Town to make sure that we are able to accommodate them during construction as best as we possibly can.
Fantastic. Anything else for the good of urban renewal? With that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.